So in this video, I'm just going to continue on showing what I started in the previous video. So the previous video was essentially just a bunch of stuff that I've shown in Blender that now I'm going to show kind of I guess the extension of that inside of Unreal. So where I ended was with the old door mechanism and the switch and all that. So I was going to show the blueprint for the switch. So let's get on with that. Okay, so the switch blueprint is pretty simple. I've set it up to have two static meshes, and when I actually created the switch, I didn't have the switch model yet, so I just used these placeholder models. And then the collision sphere, so just run up to the switch and that'll trigger the switch. So run up to the overlap, use the switch, and play the animation. Essentially all it does is it kind of, I'll show this in game, but essentially all it does is it just animates this lever to go from one side to the other. And then when it gets to the end of the animation, I'll have this control actives, and then it'll run a switch activated on that. So the control actives is a base blueprint called switch interactor. It has essentially nothing in it except for a custom event called switch activated. And then I make anything that I want to control with a switch, instead of making it a normal blueprint actor as a parent, I make it a switch interactor as a parent, and then I can use any switch that I have in the level and call that event on it. So this switch actually controls 4 things. So it'll control this gate. This gate will open. This gate is also obviously a blueprint, and it's a okay, that's from the gate base, so I actually have a gate base as well. So let's go to the gate base, and that's a switch interactor parent class, and that's the event that it calls, and all it does is opens the gate. So this gate is going to be kind of a special case where I use where I'm going to use essentially this guy to trigger the gate, but yeah, anyway, so the switch calls that. The switch also controls this thing, and this thing is obviously a blueprint, and again it calls the switch activated, and that plays an animation, and the animation is rotating the gear, and then as the gear rotates at the 3 different points, the gear, the gear teeth that still exist will trigger the this other system, this other animation that kind of pulls the chain up a little bit, and it kind of just sort of pushes that gear a little bit, and I'll show that. It'll make more sense. It also controls this blueprint, which basically just swaps out the long chain for the short chain, meaning the gate's open, right? So when this counterweight gets pulled up, the gate's been opened, and because you won't see this stuff happening, it's just a simple swap out. This switch isn't going to sit here. It's going to sit in some other place, and you'll flip the switch, and then you'll have to come back and see, okay, the one gate's open but the other one's closed, and you know, why is it closed? Let me go check out, you know, the mechanism. So yeah, so that's just simply essentially hiding the one mesh and showing the other mesh, and then this thing also, let me just see if that's what I actually did. yeah, so for this I kind of I mean, sometimes I'll plan some stuff out and sometimes I'll just sort of do things on the fly. So this is something I've just did on the fly, and because it's a one-off, uh, it's fine, right? So this also calls, so as this thing kind of ticks away, catching the gear teeth, it's also gonna um, uh, um, get this child control, I guess child controlled object. So it is controlling this object. It's a child of this blueprint, um, and that's running on the cutting chain blueprint. So this is the cutting chain blueprint. This is where you have to cut it. So I just called that directly. So I just added this, and then in the level here I can go and pick that. So I can pick the cutting chain blueprint right there. And this, as this thing sort of ticks away, it'll also call this event on this one. And the reason for that is because it also has to kind of pull that chain up and down as it sort of ticks away at the gears. And so the cutting event is something separate, and I have this set up in my game where if I add a collision object onto any actor and I call it it's capsule, I think it's I think that's, nope, it's this one, it's capsule 1. If I give it a component tag of enemy, then my attack system will detect that as something attackable, I guess. And so so I use this because you have to use a specific move to cut this chain, and you'll see how that works. But so all I do is if I wanna use a player attack, like an attack move or something, to do something, to trigger something, that's all I do. I add a capsule, call it an enemy, and my attack system will recognize it, and and really what that means is it'll be able to trigger combos, it'll be able to trigger the special jumping moves and stuff like that. If it doesn't detect an enemy when I attack, it never goes into combo, it never does any of the special moves, and that's why I have that sort of system set up. So for this, obviously you have to use some sort of jumping attack to actually get to the chain, because this ball is almost as big as the character. But yeah, so as soon as you cut the chain, and so the reason why I wanted to mention the enemy setup is because then I use these damage events to trigger stuff with it. So I can either target a specific damage value, because every attack has a very specific damage value, or I can just target whatever. So if I do more damage in one go, I'm not adding any damage, I'm not doing anything like that. It just, like, the move just has to generate more than 60 damage in one go, right? That's a very specific move. And then it'll so first thing I do basically is, because I use this collision to have it possible so that you walk into it and can stand on top of it, but you can't push the sphere around at all. So I attach that to the sphere. Initially it's not attached, but so as soon as I cut it down, I attach that to the sphere, and I actually have an arrow on there that is set to rotate in world space, so it'll essentially keep its original rotation. As this sphere rolls around, this arrow will stay upright, and I attach this to the arrow so that will stay upright. So if I don't do that, it'll kind of wobble the character, and that'll that'll put the camera out of alignment and do weird stuff. And so yeah, so essentially I just keep that collision sphere upright and facing, essentially always keeping it facing in this orientation and never rolling along. It only does positioning on the ball, it doesn't do orientation on the ball. So disable collision on the other stuff, so they you know, disable collision on this thing so it no longer works. Disable collision on this thing, which I use, which I think currently doesn't actually do anything. I'll test it. Okay, it doesn't actually do anything. It's supposed to... Okay, I was gonna use... Yeah, I was gonna actually use... I duplicated it, but I was gonna use this to block the Ninja as well. Let me just switch that. Maybe I'm screwing it up now, but... it's not gonna do any overlaps. Query, not query only, physics only. Well, we'll see if that works. Anyway, that's supposed to sort of block you from you know, before you cut the chain, so you can't just jump through the chain and stuff like that. We'll see if that actually ends up... That was the idea for this collision, but anyway, it disables that. Then I simulate physics on the skeletal mesh, and I add an impulse to push the thing around, to, you know, push the chain, and like so the chain swings and the ball goes away from, you know, it doesn't just drop down straight down. And then I also have this spark effect, particle effect, and that's pretty much all it is. And then so on top of this, what I need to do is, as soon as I cut this chain, I need to trigger this door so that it opens. But I'll set up another chain event, another sort of child event kind of thing, that allows me to control that door from this blueprint instead of the switch blueprint. So if you come down here before actually opening the door, which is possible, let me just see if I can sound mixer, get that audio down. Let's see if that works. Where is it? Yeah, so if you come down here before flipping the switch, like I said, this switch isn't going to be down here, it's going to be somewhere else. And this is basically what you're going to see. The doors are closed, these things are down here. So that's some debug arrows for my collision detection, which I've switched over to a tracing system instead of a... So I now do a trace based on the arc of the sword instead of doing collision overlaps. I found that there's way too many errors with the collision overlap, so the tracing system makes it basically 100% solid. So okay, so that collision isn't actually working currently anyway, but anyway, so this is what you'll have. So as soon as you flip the switch, you'll see that swaps over, so that will represent that the other door actually opened, and this one is stuck, right? So because the gear looks like crap, but you'll see that every time the gear teeth kind of goes into the and this is, like I said, this is all bullshit. There's supposed to be more gears underneath this, that it's like supposed to be a little bit more of an elaborate system, but this kind of sticks out at the top just so there's something to see in the game. And every time it kind of catches the mechanism underneath, instead of pulling it all the way where all the teeth catches it, it just kind of nudges it, and you can see that happening there, and that kind of gives you the clue that Right, this thing's obviously, well, it's more than a clue. I mean, this thing's obviously broken, so you have to do something about it. And so you can't just come in here and cut the chain, because that's not a powerful enough thing to do. So you have to use one of your power moves to cut the chain like that. And so the so I can stand on it, and it'll actually roll around with me on it, and that'll work perfectly because the collision is there, and I can walk into it and I can't push it, and I can still hit it and it won't do anything. I mean, this is a massive iron thing, right? You're not going to be able to move it. The chain swings nice and naturally and all that, and you can see it still nudges it. And so what'll actually happen is, currently the door doesn't open, but what'll actually happen is the door will open, and because this is still turning, this system never this will keep trying to nudge the chain, because the mechanism never finishes its cycle. And so even though the door will open, because the weight's no longer there keeping it closed, it'll keep nudging it, so that animation will still stay there. Like, it'll keep nudging it even though it's open. It'll kind of keep nudging this thing, like dunk, dunk, like that, and it'll open, and then it'll still keep sort of nudging it there as it's there, just like, just a little extra detail. But yeah, so that's that system. So this is the big guy, the mini boss. So you'll fight the mini boss just before you get into the castle. So I've got some stuff set up in the construction script that kind of punches in location values manually, essentially. If I want to move the character some specific place very quickly, I've kind of pre-programmed these areas, so I don't have to go look for the thing. I can just pick him, and then, so if I place him there, that's the start of the game, and if I place him there, that's where I want him now, so that's there, and I can just start the game there. So this guy isn't actually let me just do this. This guy isn't actually working yet. It's just sort of a model, but I just wanted to show the cloth. So there's the cloth bandages there, blowing in the wind. But that's kind of his scale compared to the player. So yeah, and you'll fight him in this little arena area. So you'll get there, you can't get out, and you won't be able to get through the door unless you kill that guy, basically. And then the castle will actually work a little bit different. So anybody that's seen videos of my game previously sort of knows how it works. You have these gates that you charge up your sword, you fight the enemies as you kill them in a specific way, slicing them in half. You'll charge up your sword, and when it's fully charged, you can come in and break this gate. It's essentially like in old school games, you have the camera that moves, the side-scrolling camera, and the camera will stop and enemies will come in, and you can't go anywhere until you kill all the enemies, and then the camera will be able to continue. And so I wanted a more free system than that, and so my solution for that was to have these gates where so you still have to kind of stop and fight all the enemies to get further, but it's less like the camera, it's not just open air stopping you, but the camera stops moving, there's actually physically something, and you have to do something to actually get through that thing. And so that was my solution for that. But it's still the same idea. It's a side-scrolling thing. You get to a point where the thing stops you, and then you have to get through it. Except it's just not the camera stopping you. It's actually a physical thing. But inside the castle, it's going to be different. There aren't going to be any gates in the castle, except I might have a gate right at the end. But in the castle, essentially, you just have to find your way through, and that's where the switches comes in. So you have to go and find the switch for the gate. So you can open the gate, and you'll see the switch behind the gate. So you'll know that, okay, you need to get to this thing. But the gate's closed, so you need to go and find where to open the gate. And it's not going to be super difficult or anything. It's just going to be a little extra thing to do, and the enemies will be a little bit like the enemies. The fighting the enemies will be almost more your choice, but you will be forced to do it because moving around with a bunch of enemies on you, you want to get rid of them. It's not going to be like you have to fight them to get out of the castle, but you will still want to fight them because of course you will want to. So the rock boss, let's take a look at the model. So it's basically him there, and I can do, where's the clothing? Can do a bit of wind. I'm not sure how to change the wind direction. Like, I don't know how to actually control this thing. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's a way to control this thing. But anyway, so there's the cloth and so you see all that sort of mess at the back. It's kind of there, but it's fine. Like this is kind of how you see the guy in the game, right? Like with the lighting. Okay, the lighting will be a little bit different. I actually move the sun as you move through the level. The sun actually changes position, so by the time you get here, the sun actually shines into this area. So it is better lit. Let me just see if it'll actually happen now. I don't think so, because there's some specific triggers that you have to trigger. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't really do it. I have to come in from further away, because there's some triggers earlier on that you have to trigger for the sun to rotate around. It's much earlier. It's around here somewhere. Anyway, so he'll be like basically the whole game. He'll be basically backlit, and this sort of scale, on screen. So the sort of the low poly and the texturing mess and all that, it's just not an issue really. I generally would do just barely enough to make the thing seem okay, and then that's it. Then I move on to the next thing. But yeah, so I think that's pretty much the stuff I wanted to show. I wanted to quickly, I guess while I'm showing it, I wanted to quickly show. Okay, so I did keep my enemy AI. So I recently, towards the beginning of this year somewhere, I redid my enemy AI, and this is essentially my original AI, and really all it does is it no, sorry, this is my original AI, and all it really does is there's essentially a split where randomly it'll pick a number, and then based on the I biased it. It's like 0 to 100, and I think I would have biased it player AI tick event. If it's, man, I don't even remember how this stuff works. So okay, so 30. So I didn't break it in half completely. So it's biased towards finding the player. So the thing would come basically and tick through this and select, like, do I look for the player or do I look for some random position in a radius essentially around the player. So I think I made it about 1,000 units or 1,000 centimeters or whatever to look for a point on the map around the player somewhere, a random point. So all the mummies, all the enemies won't just come directly into the player and an attack like they did in the beginning. I've actually split the thing in two, so that sometimes they will look for a random point, and when they reach the point they'll check again, and then maybe they'll, there's a 30% chance of them finding another random point or coming for the player, right? And then when they get to the player they attack you, and so on and so on. And the idea was also that if they're looking for a random point, if you run past them close enough, they will change their mind and come for you instead of going to their random point. But that essentially was the AI, right? Very simple. And it took all of this because I wasn't very smart when I created this, and this wasn't my first attempt. This was basically a fixed version of my first attempt. And like the first one had a lot of bugs, like the enemies would get stuck and like just weird stuff happened. And this is sort of an accumulation of things that I tried to make things work. And so it became sort of much more complicated than it needs to be. I mean, you can see how much crap is in this versus this one. I mean, this one might look also there's a lot of crap in it, but if you compare just the sheer amount of nodes, and I think in this one I also have some I might not actually have some sub nodes. I think I kept everything pretty open. But yeah, this one does essentially the same thing. It's just way more accurate and things work way better. So I recreated this from scratch. Instead of trying to fix this, I just recreated it from scratch, and yeah, so it works a lot better. Yeah, okay, so the other thing I really quickly wanted to show, and I know the video is getting really long. My videos tend to be long because I talk too much crap, but I just wanted to show this guy. So this is this other rock monster is is also a work in progress. He's getting some special AI because he has a very different behavior from the mummies, and this is just the beginning of it. I just wanted to kind of show, like, he's actually working. So he'll run at you and you can try run away, but he'll jump at you. So he's going to be basically an enemy that essentially you can't avoid them. So that's all he's got right now. He doesn't do any damage or anything right now. It's just the behavior of sort of, he'll also randomly walk around, so he might go into a walking around state at some point. I can't remember if I made him walk around. If I took it out, I might have taken it out actually. So he'll never walk around. Okay, you saw his foot there go a little bit nuts. I've got some IK on his feet that I'm trying to make work. It's actually much sort of dynamic, where it's like it'll kick in when it needs to and whatever. So you know, I mean, it's very obvious there's a lot of work on him, but that's sort of the idea of this guy. And you saw him; he actually jumped on there. He might jump down as well. Let's see. Ah, okay. Yeah, so that was a bit weird, but anyway. Yeah, so he's going to be he's probably going to be, of the normal enemies, of the normal enemies, he's probably going to be one of the more dangerous enemies when he works. But yeah, I just wanted to show that it's like a it's a very work in progress, but that's kind of the idea with that enemy. He'll have some slashes and stuff like that as well. He's not going to just only have the jump attack, but really the jump attack is he'll run and jump at you, so essentially you can't get away from him, and that's the point. It's like he's gonna be sort of relentless in trying to kill you, whereas the mummies, you know, you have to kill them to initially to get further, but you can run away from them pretty easily. They can't catch you or do anything like that, but these guys can. So I guess that's it for this video. Not super informative or anything. I just wanted to show some of the stuff that I've been working on. I guess recently, over different time periods. I mean, a bunch of this stuff I did last year sometime, and a bunch of this stuff I've been doing. I've been putting a lot more focus on this project. Last year was pretty bad. I hardly worked on this game at all last year. But yeah, this year I've been putting a lot more focus on it. I can actually sort of start seeing the finish line, and it's going to be a lot of work to get there still, but yeah, so I'm trying to just focus on it a little bit more this year. So yeah, as usual, if there's any questions or any requests for more detail on anything you saw, let me know in the comments. And yeah, thanks for watching if you made it this far. Cool.